The inexorable slide into winter has begun, so it's time to look at our solar and energy stats for October 2024. But before that, a quick reminder of our system. We have a 6.8 kilowatt peak array split east and west, so 3.4 kilowatt peak on each side, going into a GivEnergy battery system with a combined capacity of 14.7 kilowatt hours, so a 9.5 and a 5.2 kilowatt hour battery combined. And those are both going into a Gen 2 5 kilowatt hybrid inverter. We also have a Toshiba air-to-air heat pump system that runs our heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. And finally, we have a Mixergy IHP integrated heat pump cylinder that runs our hot water. And Cat also has an EV, which is currently a Fiat 500e. Okay, let's generate the GivEnergy report for October. We click on Reports here and then up to Report Type, Monthly, and October. Generate report. Starting with the generation, you can see we generated 253 kilowatt hours, and the best we managed was on the 5th at 17.64 kilowatt hours. Looks like the worst was the 16th at 2.5. Terrible generation on that day. You can see in our daily consumption chart, we actually were away for a couple of weeks in the middle of October, so our consumption was very, very low. These spikes before and after were charging the EV prior to driving to the airport, and then after we got back, we topped the car back up again once we were home. So we only consumed 465 kilowatt hours. A little bit more than September, but I'll show you why in a little bit. And you can obviously see the effect of our holiday on the battery usage. It was basically just ticking over, charging up overnight, and then supporting the house for the rest of the day. We're on regular go for October, which means that we weren't really exporting anything. So you can see that our total import from the grid was essentially most of our demand, 350 kilowatt hours, and we didn't really export much. This was basically anything that we were not using while we were on holiday. You can see most of the export happened during these 2 weeks in the middle of the month. If I scroll back up to the top here, the energy flow diagram, as always, the grid is doing a good chunk of the home now, and also filling the battery, and then obviously the battery is being used to support the home as well. And what little solar we did have was going into the home, topping up the battery a little bit, and also that small section going out to the grid as well for the rather pitiful export that we were on during October, because at the time of while October was happening, the export rate that you could get for regular go was the outgoing light at only 8 pence per kilowatt hour. Obviously that has changed now. You can now get the proper full fat outgoing export at 15 pence per kilowatt hour, although the excess solar has basically dried up, so that's essentially irrelevant, but you'll see that in the November stats. So as I said, we generated 253 kilowatt hours in October. It's a little bit lower than what we would normally expect based on the PVGIS estimate, which is this blue shaded area. You can see we're 1 standard deviation lower than the expected. If you've not tried PVGIS out before, then go check it out. It's a really useful tool and gives you this nice estimate of your output over the year. And that means that you are a little bit more aware of what's typical rather than having to base your comparisons against previous years, for example. So last year we generated 297 kilowatt hours, which was a fair bit higher than this year's October, but you can see that neither were exceptionally unusual. Last year was a little bit higher than what we would expect, but within this plus and minus 1 standard deviation band, and this year just happened to be on the lower end of that plus and minus 1 standard deviation band. So yeah, a little bit low, but nothing too unusual. So I guess that's just the way the weather happens. So with the weather on the turn now, we're using our air-to-air heat pump system a bit more for heating. So in October, we used 125.76 kilowatt hours for heating our home. You can see that actually it's quite a bit higher than last October, at 82.5 kilowatt hours, and that's because last October I noticed we only put the heating on about halfway through October, which is interesting. This year we started heating the house the last couple of days in September, and obviously all the way through October. Now, we did go away for a couple of weeks, as I mentioned before, in the middle of October, and you'd normally think that that would reduce the amount of heating that we would need. It probably did, but I did run the heating a little bit overnight just to keep the chill off the house while we were away, and that used a couple of kilowatt hours per day through that couple of weeks that we were away. Now, I would expect to, given the strategy that we're using this year, to probably use a fair bit more heating than we did last year. So what I'm doing is I'm running the heating a little bit longer, keeping the house a little bit warmer than last year. So I'm expecting all of these orange bars to exceed what we did last year's. But I'm interested to see whether that continues through the rest of the year. Because as we use the heating a little bit more, if we're running it for longer, it should be a little bit more efficient, which means that the heat pump is drawing a little bit less, putting out a little bit more heat. So with any luck, we'll have a more comfortable house and hopefully not too much more heating demand. But we'll see how that goes through the rest of the winter, and I'll obviously update this chart and show you how that goes over the next few months. So that higher heating load obviously has increased the total amount that we consumed. This month we've consumed 465 kilowatt hours. Last month it was only 380. But if you compare it to last October at 600, we're a fair bit down on that. Obviously part of that is because we were on holiday for a couple of weeks, so our typical base load was a bit lower, 177 kilowatt hours compared to a typical sort of 240, 250 kilowatt hours. Last year was 245 kilowatt hours. The dehumidifiers are being used a bit more in October, 26.8 kilowatt hours. The towel rails, 6.6 kilowatt hours. Obviously, we turned those off while we were away on holiday. The EV, we used 98 kilowatt hours. So I showed those two spikes before and after the holiday. That was mostly, the trip to the airport, recharging the car when we got home, and obviously charging it up before we left. The hot water, we only used 30 kilowatt hours in this month. This is mostly because we're using significantly less hot water than last year. Obviously, last year was 127 kilowatt hours. We were using the immersion heater in the sort of cylinder that we had at that time. This year, we've got the Mixergy IHP, which means that our daily consumption of hot water is way down now, closer to about 1.6 kilowatt hours per day, rather than the sort of 5.5 that we were consuming at the same time last year. The air-to-air heat pump system, obviously 125 kilowatt hours, giving us a total of 465 kilowatt hours. Now, people ask me how I measure these values. The EV obviously is measured by the EV charger that we've got, the GivEnergy EV charger. That tells me how much energy the car takes to charge. The hot water, the Mixergy cylinder, obviously records all the data as well, so I can use that to compile these stats, and that's very convenient and helpful. The towel rails and the dehumidifiers and the air-to-air heat pump system are all plugged into GivEnergy smart plugs, and they monitor the energy use as well. So that's really handy, and that's where I get that data from. And then everything else that I'm not monitoring, that's what gets lumped up into this blue section that I call remainder here. So that's all the other stuff like TVs and the kettle and the oven and all that other stuff that you need to run a household. So hopefully that helps you if you are curious as to where I get that data from. So as I mentioned, we switched from regular flux to regular go at the beginning of October. My reason for that was because I knew that the solar generation was reducing and our consumption was going to be increasing, having to put the heating on. But as it turns out, because we went on holiday for a couple of weeks, our generation to consumption ratio was actually a little bit higher than it probably normally would be. It was actually 0.54, so around about here. And you can see that actually flux probably still would have been the better option for us, but it's not too dissimilar to regular go at this point. They're still pretty close, so I'm happy with my decision, especially given that we're heading in this direction now with the amount of heating going up and the amount of solar going down. We're going to be absolutely going off a cliff in terms of the generation to consumption ratio, so we're going to be definitely down in this ballpark. Now, of course, this line here, the blue regular go line, is based on having the export tariff that was available in October, which was the outgoing light tariff at 8 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, at the beginning of November, the outgoing light tariff was removed, and you can now get the standard outgoing export tariff at 15 pence per kilowatt hour for regular go. Now, what happens to this chart if I switch that? And you can see this is what the chart looks like. The blue line is now significantly better for the whole year now, and not a million miles off what you can get on Intelligent Go based on my particular rule of thumb chart here. I mentioned in a previous video this week that this change means that Intelligent Go is now only about £120 per year better for us than regular Go if we were to stick with that tariff for the full year. Obviously, that's £120 that I would rather have if possible. So I would still very much like to switch to Intelligent Go at some point, but regular Go is now a much more viable prospect for a good chunk of the year. So I'm happy to stick with regular Go for now. Hopefully we'll be able to switch at some point, but I'm okay if we're having to stick with Go for the next few months. So there you go. That's what the rule of thumb tariff chart looks like. If you've not seen my other rule of thumb tariff videos, go and check those out. You might find them particularly useful to you. And as always, we'll end with the financial chart. You can see that if we had been on gas and we're using that for our hot water and our heating, and if we'd been on the standard flexible tariff and Cat didn't have an EV, then our monthly bill from Octopus would have been £151. But because we've got the solar and the battery and the EV and all those other things, our actual bill was only just about £39.36, which gives us a total saving of £112 for the month of October. Now, some people say that you shouldn't include the EV in these savings. Now, here's the thing. It's very difficult to disentangle all of this stuff from each other. So we've got obviously the A2A heat pump system. We've got the EV and we've got the solar and battery system, and that means that we've got access to all the various tariffs like Flux and Go and things like that. If we didn't have the EV, we wouldn't be able to get the EV tariffs like Go or Intelligent Go, which means that we wouldn't necessarily be able to make the same sort of level of savings for running the rest of the house, like charging the battery and stuff. So I like to keep all of this in one place because if you remove one of those components, it changes the savings for all of the other things. Yeah, they're all sort of coupled to each other and enhance the savings by combining those things. So I like to lump it all together because that's really the only way you can do it, in my opinion. If you don't agree with that, that's fine. I'm happy for you to not agree with me on that one. But yeah, I think this is a reasonable way to look at it, and it's giving us annual savings over a 12-month period. So just taking the last 12 months of about £1,962. Our total bill would have been about £2,200. We've gained a little bit of DFS savings throughout the year. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some more of these demand flexibility service sessions. I'm hoping we'll get a few more of those this winter. We shall see how that goes. But if you combine that with the actual bill that we have spent over the last 12 months, our actual net bill is only about £240, so I'm pretty pleased with that. It will be interesting to see how the winter goes because obviously I said we're using the heating a bit more, but we've also changed our strategy. We're going to be boosting our heat pump system overnight to pre-warm the house in the Octopus Go cheap period, which means hopefully our battery will last a bit longer during the day and hopefully reduce the amount of peak import that we need to use during the winter. Which means hopefully this actual bill, this red line here, should hopefully be a little bit lower than last year for each of these winter months. And we shall see. Obviously, the next few months I will report back to you as and when I get that data. But yeah, I'm as curious as you are probably to see how that goes. So there you go. That's our stats for October 2024. Now, if you like these videos and want to support what I do on this channel, then there are a number of ways you can do that. The first and easiest way is click that subscribe button. That would really help the channel. But if you also want to switch to Octopus Energy and would like to use my referral code, we'd both get £50 credited to our account when you do that. So that's another great way to support the channel. And finally, I've also now got a Buy Me a Coffee account. So by all means, feel free to buy me a coffee if you think that would be appropriate to do so. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.